My name is Natalie Porter. I'm 36. On the morning of my brother's funeral, our mother came back after 18 years and took the front pew. Linda placed her hand on the urn before she touched my shoulder. She did not ask how Caleb had died. She did not ask who held him through the last night. She looked at the empty chair beside the urn, then looked at me and said, "I am still his mother. You are just the girl who stayed." The funeral director looked at me because my name was on the service card. I had chosen Caleb's songs, approved the photo, answered the calls, and signed every line Linda had not been there to read. I folded that card once, slowly enough to steady my hands. "Let her finish," I said. But here's what Linda didn't know. Caleb had left one final message sealed inside the guest book. I still keep that guest book on my kitchen table, and that message is why I can say my brother's name without my voice breaking. If you have ever watched someone claim grief they did not earn, stay with me. And if you believe the person who stayed deserves to be named, please like this story and subscribe. Let me take you back to the first winter after Linda left, when Caleb was 12 and I learned how to sign permission slips with my own name. The first winter after Linda left, our house in Akron felt too big in the wrong places. Not because it was nice. It wasn't. It was a narrow rental with tired carpet, a furnace that clicked before it worked, and a kitchen window that let in cold air around the frame. It felt too big because every room had one less adult in it, and every ordinary thing suddenly needed a person who knew what to do. I was 18. Caleb was 12. Our father had already been gone long enough that people stopped asking about him. Linda did not leave with a speech. That would have required staying in the room long enough to watch our faces change. She left a note on the counter under a yellow magnet from a dentist's office. It said, "I need air. Don't make this harder than it has to be." She took 2 suitcases, the good hairdryer, and the envelope where she kept Caleb's birth certificate. She left the light over the stove on. Caleb found the note before school. He read it once, then looked at me as if I could translate it into something kinder. I could not. I was still wearing the grocery store polo I had slept in after a closing shift. I remember the little white name tag still pinned to my chest. Natalie, it said, in letters big enough for strangers to read and not big enough to make me feel like a real adult. That morning, Caleb had a field trip form due. It was for the Science Museum in Cleveland, and he wanted to go because the permission slip said there would be a planetarium. Linda had not signed it. I looked at the blank parent line, then at Caleb's face, and I signed my own name. My hand shook so hard the P in Porter looked like it had been written on a bus. Caleb did not say anything. He just folded the paper and put it into his backpack like I had handed him something normal. That was the first thing Linda left me, a line where a mother's name should have been. I learned fast after that. I learned which bills could be paid 3 days late. I learned which school secretary would accept my signature if I came in person and looked tired enough to be believed. I learned how to stretch a rotisserie chicken into soup, sandwiches, and something Caleb generously called casserole. I learned that if you call a utility company before they call you, they treat you like a struggling customer instead of a problem. These were not life skills. They were weather reports. Every day I checked where the storm was coming from. Linda called 9 days later. Caleb grabbed the phone before I could. He stood in the kitchen with the cord stretched across the counter, listening like she was calling from another country instead of a motel 2 towns away. I watched his shoulders rise, then fall. He said, "I'm okay." Even though he had cried into a pillow the night before because his gym shoes had split open at the side. Linda talked for 4 minutes. She did not ask about the field trip. She did not ask whether there was food in the refrigerator. She asked if we still had the box of family photos from the hall closet. When Caleb handed me the phone, Linda said, "Don't make this harder than it has to be." I looked at the stove light still glowing behind me. I wanted to say it was already hard. I wanted to tell her that Hard had moved into the house and taken her side of the bed. Instead, I said, "What do you need from the box?" She sighed like I was the one being difficult. Caleb went to the planetarium 2 days later. He came home with a paper star chart and a plastic cup full of astronaut ice cream crumbs. He showed me where Orion was supposed to be. Then he asked if Mom had called again. I told him no. He nodded like he had expected that answer and hated himself for hoping for a different one. That was Caleb's way. He did not break loudly. He folded inward. If you were not watching closely, you might miss the whole collapse. His teachers noticed me before they noticed Linda was gone. At parent-teacher conferences, I sat in chairs built for adults who had slept. Caleb's English teacher, Mrs. Donnelly, asked if our mother would be joining us. Caleb looked at the bulletin board. I said, "She couldn't make it." It was the kindest lie I had. After the meeting, Caleb slipped a folded paper into my coat pocket. I did not open it until we were back in the car. It said, "Thank you for coming even though you were tired." He had written it in pencil, small and careful, like gratitude was something he did not want to bother anyone with. That became his habit. Caleb wrote the things he could not say. He wrote apologies on napkins even when he had done nothing wrong. He wrote jokes in the margins of grocery lists. He wrote, "Don't forget inhaler" on the back of my hand once, because he knew I would forget myself before I forgot him. When he was 15, he bought a cheap black notebook from a drugstore and wrote on the first page, "If I write it down, it can't run away before I say it." He showed me the sentence with his thumb covering half the page, embarrassed by his own honesty. I kept that notebook in the kitchen drawer after he filled it, not because I thought it would matter one day. I kept it because Caleb had a way of making paper feel like proof that a person had been here. Years pass the way, hard years pass, not cleanly, not in chapters. Caleb grew taller. I moved from cashier to assistant manager at the same grocery store. We moved from the narrow rental to a second-floor apartment over a laundromat, then to a small duplex, with a porch that leaned a little to the left. Linda drifted in and out at the edges of our lives like smoke under a door. She sent birthday cards late when she sent them at all. She called from numbers I did not recognize. She always sounded like she was on her way somewhere better. When Caleb was 19, Linda asked to meet him at a diner near the interstate. He wanted me to come but pretended he didn't. He changed shirts twice. He shaved even though he barely needed to. I drove him there and sat in the booth beside him because he kept tapping his foot under the table. Linda walked in wearing sunglasses on top of her head and a smile that looked practiced. She hugged Caleb too long for a woman who had missed 7 birthdays, then held him by both shoulders and said, "Look at you, you turned out fine." Turned out fine. Like he had been a cake she forgot in the oven but still expected compliments for. Caleb smiled because he was kind before he was safe. Linda ordered coffee and talked about starting fresh. She said people made mistakes. She said mothers were human. She said she had been young, as if I had been elderly at 18. Then she asked if Caleb had his original birth certificate, social security card, and any medical papers from when he was little. Caleb blinked. I saw it land. He had come to hear why she left. She had come for documents. On the drive home, he held the paper placemat from the diner in his lap. He had drawn boxes around the little ads for plumbers and insurance agents. Halfway home, he said, "She didn't ask where I work." I said no. He said, "She didn't ask if I'm seeing anybody." I said, "No." He looked out at the highway lights and said, "She asked about papers." I did not answer. Some truths do not need a second witness. 2 months later, Caleb had an asthma attack bad enough to send us to the emergency room. He had dealt with breathing problems since childhood, but that night scared him. It scared me too, though I was careful not to show it. A nurse handed him a clipboard and asked for his emergency contact. Caleb wrote my name without pausing. Natalie Porter. Sister. He wrote my number from memory. When the nurse asked if there was a parent to list, Caleb shook his head. "No," he said. "Natalie is the one who comes." Linda found out because the hospital called an old number on file and left a message. She called me the next day, angry before hello. "You had no right to cut me out," she said. I was standing in aisle 5 at work, facing a shelf of canned tomatoes. I remember that because a woman beside me was comparing prices while my mother rewrote my life into something ugly. Linda said Caleb was still her son. She said I had always wanted to control everything. Then she said the line she liked best. "Don't make this harder than it has to be." I said, "He chose the contact." She said, "He chose what you trained him to choose." That one stayed with me. Not because it was true, because it told me how she survived herself. In Linda's version, Caleb could never love me on his own. He had to be managed into it, tricked into it, turned against her. Otherwise, she would have had to admit that a child she left had grown up and made a clear decision without her. Caleb heard about the call because I was bad at hiding things from him. He came into the kitchen that night and placed a folded index card beside my coffee. On it he had written, "You did not steal me. You stayed until I stopped waiting at the window." I read it once. Then I turned toward the sink because I did not want him to see what it did to me. Caleb said. You can keep that one. I did. By the time Caleb was 26, he had become the kind of man people trusted with small things. Spare keys. Dog feeding. Picking up prescriptions. He worked at a print shop and learned how to make old photographs look a little less tired. He had a dry little sense of humor that came out when people underestimated him. If someone said he was quiet, he would say, "I'm not quiet. I'm just editing." He never became loud. He became exact. Linda did not know that version of him. She knew the boy she had left and the man she imagined when guilt needed a softer pillow. She called every few months. Sometimes Caleb answered. Sometimes he let it ring. When he did answer, he was polite. That was not forgiveness. That was Caleb refusing to become rude just because someone had earned it. Then, when Caleb was 29, his health began to tilt in a way none of us could ignore. It did not happen like a movie. There was no one dramatic day where everything changed. There were appointments, then more appointments. There were tests with names I will not give you because this story is not about medical words. It is about who shows up when the waiting room chairs get familiar. I went to every appointment. Caleb made jokes with nurses. He brought printed crossword puzzles because phone batteries died too fast in hospitals. He wrote questions in a notebook before each visit because he did not trust himself to remember them under fluorescent lights. I sat beside him and held the notebook when his hands got tired. Some days we still laughed. Some days the best we could do was get to the car before either of us spoke. Linda came after she heard the word serious from a cousin. She arrived with a scarf, a soft voice, and a phone she kept checking to see if anyone had liked her post about family healing. Caleb let her visit. He was kinder than I would have been. She sat beside his bed and took his hand when other people were watching. When they weren't, she asked me where his insurance papers were. She asked whether he had made any arrangements. She asked if there was money somewhere for expenses. She did not ask whether he was scared until he was awake enough to hear her. One afternoon after Linda left, Caleb asked me to bring him a box from his closet. It was a plain cardboard box with old notebooks, birthday cards, and photographs inside. At the bottom was a guest book with a gray cloth cover. It was too nice for our family and too simple for Linda. Caleb ran his fingers over the cover and said, "I want this at the service." I said, "We don't have to talk about that today." He gave me a look. It was the same look he used when I pretended not to be tired. Gentle, but not fooled. "We do," he said. "Because if we don't, people will fill in the blanks for me." I sat beside him. He told me he did not want lilies because they gave him headaches. He wanted the blue shirt, not the black suit jacket, because he said the jacket made him look like a substitute teacher. He wanted the photo from Lake Erie where his hair was a mess and he was laughing at something off camera. He wanted one song our grandmother used to hum, even though neither of us knew all the words. He wanted the guest book on the table before anyone spoke. Then he opened the cover. I saw one page turned face down and sealed with a strip of clear tape. Caleb pressed the cover shut before I could read it. "Not yet," he said. I asked what it was. He said, "Something I need to say without getting interrupted." That was Caleb. Even near the end, he understood the room better than the rest of us. I put the guest book in my bag that day. It was not a weapon then. It was a promise. I did not know Linda would walk straight into it. I did not know she would stand in front of Caleb's urn and make the one sentence he had written for me become the one sentence no one could forget. After Caleb handed me the guest book, I became careful in a way that looked boring from the outside. I made calls. I wrote things down. I saved emails. I asked Caleb the same questions twice because grief makes people hear what they want, and I wanted to hear him correctly. He hated being treated like glass. So I treated his wishes like instructions from a man who still had the right to be specific. That helped him. It helped me too. The funeral home was a low brick building near a Methodist church. Caleb had never attended, but always used as a landmark. The funeral director, Mr. Hayes, was a soft-spoken man with silver glasses and a habit of pausing before he answered. He did not talk over Caleb. That mattered. The first time Caleb was well enough to meet him, Mr. Hayes asked what kind of service he wanted. Caleb said, "Short enough that people don't start lying from exhaustion." Mr. Hayes smiled once and wrote that down as simple service. Linda came to that meeting 12 minutes late. She brought a coffee with whipped cream and said traffic was terrible, although she had posted a picture from a boutique across town 20 minutes earlier. She sat on Caleb's other side and touched his sleeve. Caleb looked at her hand, like he was trying to decide whether it belonged there. Mr. Hayes asked about music. Linda said, "Amazing Grace." Caleb said, "No." Linda blinked. "Everyone uses that." Caleb said, "That's not a reason." I looked down at my notebook and wrote what he actually wanted. Mr. Hayes asked about flowers. Linda said lilies. Caleb said, "No lilies." His voice was weak, but the no was clean. Mr. Hayes turned to me, not Linda, and asked, "Is there a reason?" I said, "They give him headaches." Caleb nodded. Linda gave a little laugh. "He was always dramatic about smells," she said. Caleb closed his eyes. Mr. Hayes wrote no lilies in block letters. That was the first time I saw the scales shift in someone else's face. Not enough for a speech. Just enough. Mr. Hayes looked from Linda to Caleb, then to me. And I could tell he understood that the woman saying, "always," did not know what had always meant. Linda did not like losing the room. She leaned back and folded her arms. "Don't make this harder than it has to be," she said. She was looking at me, but Caleb answered. "I'm not," he said. "I'm making it mine." Linda's mouth opened, then closed. For once, she had no sentence polished enough to cover the moment. A week later, Caleb asked me to meet him at the print shop after hours. He had been too tired to work full days, but his boss still let him come in when he wanted to feel useful. The shop smelled like toner and warm paper. Caleb sat at the counter with a stack of photos spread in front of him. He had circled the Lake Erie picture in blue pen. "This one," he said. "If Mom brings the old-school picture where I look like a scared turtle, stop her." I laughed before I could stop myself. Caleb grinned. I looked terrible. I said, "You looked 12. He said, "Exactly, terrible." He slid an envelope toward me. Inside were copies of his service preferences, the contact sheet for Mr. Hayes, and a note about a small memorial fund his coworkers had started. It was not a fortune. It was $18,400 by the time everything came in, mostly from people at the print shop, neighbors, old friends, and customers who liked Caleb because he remembered their names. Caleb wanted funeral costs paid first. Anything left would go to a local program that helped teenagers who had become caregivers at home. He did not make a speech about it. He just tapped the line and said, "You'll know why." I did. Of course I did. Linda found out about the fund because she was very good at finding the parts of family that could be turned into leverage. She called me 2 nights later. I was in the duplex kitchen, wrapping Caleb's blue shirt in tissue paper so it would not wrinkle. Linda did not ask how he was. She said, "I heard people are donating." I said yes. She said, "As his mother, I should handle that." I said, "Caleb already made arrangements." There was a pause. Not grief. Calculation. Then she said, "You really do enjoy making me look bad." That was the second time she told me exactly what she feared. Not losing Caleb. Not hurting him. Looking bad. I did not argue with her. I had learned that an argument with Linda was a room with no exits. She could turn apology into accusation, absence into sacrifice, and silence into proof that you were cruel. So I did the thing I had learned at 18. I wrote everything down. Time of call. What she asked for. What she did not ask. I forwarded Mr. Hayes the paperwork Caleb had signed. I put the guest book in a kitchen drawer and checked twice that the tape on the first page had not lifted. Caleb died on a Thursday just before dawn. I will not give you the private details of that morning. Some moments are not more powerful because they are described. I will tell you this. His hand was warm when I took it. The room was quiet enough that I could hear the machine in the hallway, printing discharge papers for someone else. Caleb opened his eyes once and looked toward my coat on the chair. I thought he wanted water. He whispered, "Book." I said, "I have it." His fingers moved once against my palm. That was all. Linda came 3 hours later. She entered the room wearing sunglasses, though the blinds were closed. She made a sound when she saw him. I do not know if it was real. I am not proud that I still wonder. Grief can be real and selfish at the same time. She touched Caleb's hair, then turned to me and said, "Why didn't you call me sooner?" I looked at the clock. I had called her 12 minutes after he passed. She had not answered. I did not say that. I was too tired to hand her another doorway into drama. Mr. Hayes called that afternoon. He asked if we would still use the gray guest book Caleb had chosen. I said yes. He asked who would bring it. I said I would. He asked who would approve the final service card. I said I would. Linda stood across the kitchen while I answered, watching me like each yes was something I had stolen from her. When I hung up, she said, "I am his mother." I said, "Then you know he hated lilies." She looked away. It was a small thing. It landed anyway. In the days before the funeral, Linda became busy in public. She posted an old photo of Caleb at 8 years old with the caption, "A mother's love never leaves." She changed her profile picture to the two of them from a birthday party before she left. She replied to comments with broken heart emojis and sentences about unbearable loss. People who did not know our history wrote, "You were such a good mom." I read one comment and put the phone face down. Caleb would have hated the grammar. That was the only thought that kept me from breaking something. Marcus, Caleb's closest friend from the print shop, came by the duplex the night before the service. He was a broad-shouldered man who looked uncomfortable holding flowers, so he brought printer paper instead. "He would have made fun of the flowers," Marcus said. I said, "He would have made fun of you for buying the expensive paper." Marcus nodded. "He did. In advance." He handed me a small photo Caleb had printed months earlier. It showed Caleb and me at the Lake Erie railing, both of us squinting into wind. On the back, Caleb had written, "Use this if people start acting like they knew me better than Nat." I put the photo inside the guest book, not on the sealed page. That part mattered. Caleb's final message stayed closed. Marcus saw the tape and did not ask. Good friends know when a question is just a way to make someone open a wound early. That night, Linda called me from a hotel. She said she wanted to speak first at the service. I said Caleb had set the order. She said, "He was sick, Natalie." I said, "He was clear." Her voice sharpened. "Don't make this harder than it has to be." There it was again. The old sentence in a new dress. I looked at the guest book on my table and said, "I'm not." Then I hung up before she could teach me another version of my own cruelty. The morning of the funeral arrived gray and windless. Not dramatic. Just dull, the way terrible days often are. I woke before my alarm and sat on the edge of my bed with Caleb's blue shirt folded across my lap. The guest book was already in my bag. I had checked it 3 times. I had checked the service cards twice. I had checked myself less than that, because there was no time to fall apart, and no use pretending I could schedule it for later. Mr. Hayes opened the funeral home early for me. He wore a dark suit and the silver glasses. He did not say, "I'm sorry for your loss again." He had said it once, and meant it. After that, he used practical sentences, which I appreciated. "The urn is ready. The photo is on the table. The service cards are stacked by the door." Grief does not always need poetry. Sometimes it needs someone who knows where the tape is. I placed the gray guest book on the table near the entrance. I set a pen beside it. I did not open the sealed page. Mr. Hayes looked at the cover and said, "This is the one Caleb requested?" I said yes. He nodded. "Then it stays here until the service begins." That was all. No ceremony, no music, just a small object put where it belonged. People began arriving at 9:20. Caleb's coworkers came in a group, quieter than I had ever seen them. Marcus signed the guest book and stood near the back with his hands clasped in front of him. Mrs. Donnelly, the teacher from Caleb's middle school years, came with a cane and a packet of tissues. I had not expected her. She hugged me gently and said, "He sent me a Christmas card every year after graduation." I had not known that. Caleb was always leaving little doors open behind him. At 9:41, Linda arrived. I know the exact time because I looked at the clock when the front door opened and felt my whole body become still. She wore a black dress, a black hat, and a grief face polished for company. 2 women came with her. I did not know them. They looked at me with the cautious kindness of people who had heard only one side, and were preparing to forgive me for things I had never done. Linda did not stop at the guest book. She walked straight to the table with the urn. The photo I had chosen was there, the Lake Erie one Caleb wanted. His hair was blown sideways. His eyes were half closed from laughing. Linda picked it up between 2 fingers, looked at it, and set it aside. From her purse, she took an old-school photo of Caleb in a stiff collar, his smile uncertain, his shoulders too high. She placed it beside the urn. I walked over. Not fast. Fast would have given her what she wanted. I picked up the Lake Erie photo and set it back in the center. Linda's jaw tightened. "That picture is unflattering," she said. I said, "He chose it." She said. He wasn't thinking clearly. I said. He was thinking like himself. One of the women behind her shifted her purse from one arm to the other. It was a tiny sound. It told me Linda's version of me had begun to meet the room. There were 47 names in the guest book by 9:53. I counted because my eyes needed something to do. The service began at 10. The front pew had 6 seats. Linda sat in the middle of it at 9:55 and placed her purse on the chair beside her. She saved 2 more seats for the women she had brought. That left no room for me, unless I asked. I did not ask. I sat in the second row, directly behind the chair Linda had taken. Mr. Hayes came to me with the service card. "We are ready when you are," he said. Linda heard him. Of course she did. She stood immediately. "I'll speak first," she said. Mr. Hayes paused. "The order Caleb approved begins with Natalie welcoming everyone." Linda smiled. Not kindly. "I am his mother." She let the sentence sit there, heavy and useful. Then she turned to me, and for the first time that morning, she spoke loudly enough for the people near the front to hear. "This is not the day for Natalie to make herself important. There are moments when a room leans without moving. I felt it then. People wanted someone to fix the discomfort quickly. That is what people often want from the person who has been hurt. They want you to be graceful fast, so they do not have to choose a side slowly." I looked at the urn. I looked at the guest book. The tape on the first page had held. Caleb had known what words needed a room. Linda had just given him one. Before the service began, there was one quiet moment after I checked the guest book and before Linda reached for the microphone. That is where I want to pause with you. If you have ever been the one who stayed, write, "I stayed," in the comments. In a moment, Linda was going to ask for the microphone, and that was the first honest thing she did all morning, because it gave Caleb's words a room to land in. Linda stepped toward Mr. Hayes and held out her hand. "Give me the microphone," she said. Mr. Hayes looked at me. This time, no one had to wonder why. My name was on the card. My signature was on the service order. My brother's wishes were in my bag, on paper, in his own small, careful habits. I gave Mr. Hayes one nod. Linda took the microphone. She turned toward the room with the urn beside her and the wrong photo still close enough to look like a threat. "Thank you all for coming," she said, her voice soft in the way people use softness, when they want applause for not screaming. "As Caleb's mother, I need to say something before anyone else speaks. I know some people have tried to keep me from my place today, but grief has a way of showing what really matters." Then she looked straight at me. "I am still his mother. Natalie is just the girl who stayed." I stood up slowly. The room did not go silent all at once. It changed in pieces. A cough stopped near the back. Someone's program paper bent in half and stayed there. Marcus lowered his head, then lifted it again. I did not look at Linda first. I looked at Caleb's urn, because this was still his service, and I needed to remember that before I let anyone else forget it. Linda kept the microphone in her hand. Her fingers were tight around it, the way a person holds a handle on a door they are not sure will open. "Natalie," she said, "not now." I walked to the guestbook table. My steps sounded too loud to me. That happens in grief. Small things start behaving like announcements. I picked up the gray book with both hands and carried it to the front. Linda gave a little laugh. "Don't make this harder than it has to be." She said it like a warning. She had used that sentence when she left. She had used it when Caleb chose me as his emergency contact. She had used it when she wanted the memorial fund. She had used it the night before, from a hotel room, while Caleb's blue shirt waited on my kitchen chair. By then, the sentence was not a sentence anymore. It was a receipt. I stopped beside the urn. I did not take the microphone from her. I did not raise my voice. I said, "Caleb made this easier before any of us walked in." Linda's face changed, but only a little. Her smile thinned. "What is that supposed to mean?" she asked. I opened the guest book. The first page was still sealed with the clear tape Caleb had pressed down with his own hand. I slid one finger under the loose edge and lifted it. The sound was small. Everyone heard it. The page was not a list of names. It was Caleb's handwriting. Small, slanted, careful enough that every word looked like he had chosen it twice. I looked at the page for 1 second longer than I needed. Not because I did not know what it said. Because it was his writing. And for a moment, it felt like he had entered the room before me. Then I read, "If there is a question today about who my family was, ask who came when the school called. Ask who learned my prescriptions. Ask who sat in waiting rooms and remembered that lilies made my head hurt. Ask who signed when there was a blank line and stayed when there was no applause. Natalie is not just the girl who stayed. She is the reason I knew what home felt like. No one moved for half a breath. Then the room began to answer without words. Mrs. Donnelly pressed a tissue to her mouth and closed her eyes. Marcus put one hand on the back of the pew in front of him, like his knees had briefly forgotten their job. One of Linda's friends looked down at the old-school photo Linda had brought, then away from it. Mr. Hayes lowered his eyes to the service card in his hand. Linda stared at the guest book. Her mouth opened. Nothing useful came out. The microphone dipped in her hand. She looked at the page, then at the urn, then at me. For the first time that morning, she seemed to understand that Caleb was not an object she could hold up to prove she had been wronged. He had been a person. He had paid attention. He had remembered. I kept my voice even. He wanted his words read before anyone spoke for him. Mr. Hayes stepped forward. He did not snatch the microphone. He held out his hand, palm open, and waited. Linda looked at him like she expected rescue. He gave none. After a moment, her fingers loosened. The microphone left her hand. It was not dramatic. That made it worse for her. Some losses arrive quietly enough for everyone to watch. Mr. Hayes turned to the room. Caleb Porter confirmed Natalie Porter as the person responsible for the order of today's service, he said. We will follow Caleb's written wishes. He did not say Linda had lied. He did not need to. The guest book was open. Caleb's handwriting was on the page. There are some arguments a living person cannot win against the honest words of the dead. A staff member moved the old-school photo from beside the urn and returned the Lake Erie picture to the center. That small movement did more than any speech could have done. The boy Linda wanted to display disappeared from the table. The man Caleb had chosen to be remembered as came back, wind in his hair, laughing at something the rest of us could not hear. Mr. Hayes placed a sealed envelope and a small cardboard box beside me on the front table. These are Caleb's personal effects and the memorial fund instructions, he said quietly, not to the room, but not hidden from it either. He directed both to you. The box was light. That almost broke me. A whole life can leave behind so little weight. Linda heard him. Her eyes snapped to the envelope. There it was. The thing she had been circling since the word donations first reached her. Not a fortune. Not enough to make anyone rich. Just enough to let her stand in the center of Caleb's ending and say she had handled what mattered. Now even that had left her hands. Marcus walked forward then. He did not speak at first. He took the small Lake Erie photo he had brought the night before and placed it beside the guest book. It showed Caleb and me at the railing, both of us squinting into the wind. On the back, in Caleb's handwriting, were the words Marcus had already shown me. Use this if people start acting like they knew me better than Nat. Marcus did not read it aloud. He did not have to. I saw Linda see the handwriting. I saw her understand it was not one page. Caleb had left a trail. That was the moment she truly lost the room. Not when Mr. Hayes took the microphone. Not when the envelope moved to me. She lost it when she realized Caleb had been choosing for years, quietly, in ink, in forms, in emergency contacts, in jokes on the backs of photographs. She had imagined one public morning could erase 18 years. Caleb had made sure one public morning told the truth about them. Linda sat down. The front pew did not look like a throne anymore. It looked like a bench with too much space around one woman. I placed the guest book beside the urn, open to Caleb's message. Then I turned to the room and welcomed everyone to my brother's service. My voice did not break. Not because I was strong. Because Caleb had gone first. The service continued after that. People sometimes imagine a moment like that ends with shouting, with someone storming out, with the room splitting cleanly into good people and bad people. Real life is usually less tidy. Linda stayed in the front pew. Her friends stayed beside her, smaller somehow. Mr. Hayes followed the order Caleb had approved. I welcomed everyone. Marcus read a short memory about Caleb correcting a print order for a customer who had misspelled her own grandson's name. Mrs. Donnelly laughed through tears when she told us Caleb once wrote an entire essay about why cafeteria pizza should be legally reclassified as cardboard. Linda did not speak. After the service, people came to me in a line that did not feel like a line. They touched my arm. They said Caleb was funny, kind, careful, stubborn in quiet ways. They told me things he had done that I never knew. He had fixed an old man's Christmas cards for free. He had kept extra quarters for a neighbor's laundry. He had sent Mrs. Donnelly a card every December, because, he told her once, she had been the first teacher who did not ask where his mother was in front of the class. Each story felt like finding one more light on in a house I thought I already knew. Linda waited until most people had left. She stood near the table where the urn had been. The old school photo was in her purse again. I saw the corner sticking out. For a second, I felt sorry for the boy in that picture. Not for Linda. For the version of Caleb she wanted to keep because it could not correct her. Mr. Hayes handed me the cardboard box and the envelope with the memorial fund instructions. Linda stepped forward. "I should have some of his things," she said. Her voice was lower now. Not soft. Lower. There is a difference. Softness gives. Lower only hides the sharp part. I looked at the box in my hands. Inside were Caleb's watch, his keys, a folded receipt from the print shop, and the cheap black notebook he had kept after filling the first one years before. Mr. Hayes said. Caleb's instructions were clear. Linda looked at him, then at me. "He was my son." I said. "He was." I did not add anything. That was the hand I chose not to raise. The memorial fund was $18,400. After the funeral costs were paid, the rest went where Caleb had written for it to go. A local program that helped teenagers who were caring for family members at home. 3 weeks later, I received a thank you letter from the program director. She wrote that the money would cover rides, school supplies, and emergency grocery cards for kids who were trying to be students and adults at the same time. I read that sentence twice. Then I set the letter beside Caleb's guest book. Linda had wanted to handle the fund. I learned later that she had already drafted a memorial page with her name under the words, "Beloved Mother." She had chosen a photo from before she left. She had written a paragraph about a mother's unbearable grief. She never published it. I know because one of the women who came with her sent me a message afterward. It said, "I did not know. That was all." Sometimes that is as much apology as a bystander can manage. 2 weeks after the funeral, Linda came to my duplex. She did not call first. She knocked 3 times, hard enough to wake me from a nap I had not meant to take. When I opened the door, she looked older than she had at the service. That was the first time I saw her without an audience in years. No black hat, no soft voice, no photo in her hand. Just Linda, standing on my porch with her purse strap twisted in her fingers. "I didn't know how to come back," she said. I believed that. I also knew it was not enough. Not knowing how to come back is not the same as being locked out. Linda had addresses. She had phone numbers. She had years. She had a son who would have answered if she had called without asking for papers. She had a daughter who signed forms at 18 and still would have opened the door if Linda had come without trying to take the room. "You knew where the door was," I said. She looked down. For a moment, I saw something close to shame. It did not fix anything. Shame is not repair. Shame is just pain finally facing the right direction. Linda asked if we could talk sometime. I said she could write me a letter if she wanted. I did not promise to answer. I did not promise to read it quickly. I did not call her mom. She noticed. I let her. That was my boundary. Not a slammed door. Not a speech. Just a line she no longer got to move with her feelings. After she left, I made coffee in Caleb's mug. It was chipped near the handle because he had dropped it in the sink and refused to throw it away. "Still works," he had said. That was Caleb's whole philosophy, if you let him get away with it. I carried the mug to the kitchen table and opened the guest book. Not to the first page. Not that day. I opened to the signatures. 47 names. 47 little proofs that Caleb had been known in more places than Linda understood. The guest book stayed on my kitchen table for a long time. At first, I touched it every morning. Then every few days. Then only when I needed to remember that being quiet did not mean Caleb had been unclear. Sometimes I placed my hand on the gray cloth cover and left it there while the coffee brewed. That was enough. The book did not bring him back. Nothing does. It did something smaller and steadier. It kept the room honest. Blood can explain where you began. It cannot prove who stayed. Family, I learned, is not always the person who takes the front pew. It is the person who knows which photo you chose because you hated the stiff one. It is the person who remembers lilies gave you headaches. It is the person who signs the blank line, sits in the waiting room, saves the jokes on the backs of photographs, and keeps the guest book closed until your words need to stand up for you. That's my story. 18 years. One front pew, one urn, 47 names in a guest book. One sentence meant to make me small. Just the girl who stayed. I'm Natalie Porter. I was called just the girl who stayed, and in the end, staying was the only thing Caleb asked the room to remember. If you have ever been the person who stayed while someone else came back when there was an audience, I want you to hear me clearly. You do not have to fight for every chair to know where you belong. Some love is proven in public. The deeper kind is usually proven when nobody is clapping. Share this story with someone who carried a family role no one named. Comment the name of the person who truly stayed for you, or simply write, "I stayed." And subscribe if you want more stories about quiet truth, family boundaries, and the kind of dignity no one can take once you finally name it.